They're just trickling in. Get started here in a minute. All right, people are still trickling in, so we're going to go ahead and get started. As doors keep opening and the bells on the Zoom door keep ringing, we're going to go ahead and kick it off. So for everyone who is in the room and joining us on Zoom, welcome to the third webinar on the Your Next Best Hire series from the Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council. We're really excited to have everyone here, and a little bit about us, a little bit about the series. It is developed by LaDDC, which is, like I said, the Developmental Disabilities Council in the state of Louisiana. It's one of 56 DD councils across the country, and its primary role is to be a vehicle for advocacy and public policy, education, and information for individuals with developmental disabilities and their families across the state of Louisiana. Part of their work is to fund initiatives and grants that allow for community living, independent living for people with DD. And one of those roles is in employment. So part of that is hosting this webinar series where we wanted to discuss competitive integrated employment and also bring together leaders in the space who are making employment a reality for people with developmental disabilities, but also bridging that gap between employers as well as the consumers or people who are searching for these great positions. Today, we are joined by the Department of Transportation. Is that correct? In Louisiana, with Charles Wood, who is our staffing manager, and Jason Hooper, who is in employee relations, as well as Zelie Guidry, who is an employment specialist and who also connects employers with consumers. And we're really going to talk about the benefits of hiring, but also including recruiting individuals with developmental disabilities in your hiring practices. So what have been the benefits? How do you go about it? And what are some soft benefits that they've gotten out of those qualitative skills that they have been able to develop and also work with, but also some quantitative ones, and how has that impacted their entire workforce? So without further ado, we're going to get right away into introductions, and then we're going to go right into a panel discussion on best practices, lessons learned, and some advice for hiring managers and those considering as they're recruiting, what they should consider in getting started, and also as they're looking to diversify their workforce. So we're going to start off with DOTD, and I'm going to let Charles Wood and Jason Hooper kick it off to introduce themselves, a little bit about their agency, and kind of what their roles are in their agency specifically before we jump into our conversation with Zelie. So welcome, Charles, and welcome, Jason.
Good morning, and thank you all for having us today. It's an honor to be part of this and to kind of talk about some of our hiring practices. My name is Charles Wood, and I'm a HR manager over staffing. A little bit about our agency. We are responsible for roads, bridges, ports, rail, some aviation. We have our hands in a whole lot of pots. And so statewide, we have a little over 4,300 positions, and we hire individuals from all walks of life to fill our needs. We hire everything from the equipment operators and folks that you see actually working on the road to police, attorneys, engineers, even HR staff like Jason and myself. So part of our filling our needs as an agency is to have a diverse applicant pool. And part of those applicants come from, I mean, we come from many different sources, but is coming from individuals with disabilities. And so we've made 7 commitments that are part of our SAME, which is State as a Model Employer initiative, that we're going through this year, and we did this last year, and we've done this for the last several years, but to help build those relationships. One of the main things you're going to hear me say today, probably over and over, is relationships. Some of our challenges especially after 2020 and COVID, was that other agencies, state agencies, other partners, community partners that we've had have faced a lot of the same challenges that we have with hiring individuals. And so by tapping into multiple applicant pools, it has helped us do a lot better job with filling our needs, or serving our needs of not only the agency, but of our customers. And that's the population of Louisiana. Anybody that drives is going to drive on a DOTD road at some point. So as long as you drive out your neighborhood, you're probably on one of our roads eventually. If not, whatever bridge you cross, we've inspected it. So we touch a lot of different things, which requires having individuals, kind of like I said, of all backgrounds. And part of our initiatives are ensuring that anytime that we work with Louisiana Rehabilitation Services or LRS, is that we're making sure that we're putting those individuals that have applied for our jobs in contact with our hiring managers. Some of the programs that we have been very successful with go through BRCC and their Program for Successful Employment, or their PSE program. And we'll talk more about that, I think, as we get into some of the questions. But we're always looking for new partnerships with different community-based organizations, even other state agencies, that'll help us to increase that pipeline and clear maybe some of these gum up points that we've had over the last couple of years. So without much further ado, I'll hand it over to Jason, and he'll talk a little bit about some of our employee relations things.
Hey, thanks, Charles. Jason Hooper, Employee Relations. How's everyone today? One of my roles in employee relations is to ensure DOTD is in compliance with ADA compliance. So a lot of our policies are geared exactly towards how they have them in the ADA. One of those things that we do provide is training for our current employees. The training that we do provide is disability etiquette. So that's, how you behave around somebody with disabilities. So, we have a lot of different employees here at DOTD. We have over 4,000 employees, and each person comes from a different background. And there may be some employees that have never engaged with somebody with a disability, or one of the many different types of disabilities that are out there. So they need to know how to, because they're learning for the first time. A lot of them, this could be the first time that they've been around somebody with a particular disability. Disability etiquette class allows them how to behave, shows them how to behave properly with somebody with disabilities. We also have disability awareness training, and that discusses the different types of abilities. It increases the knowledge of our employees so they know and can be aware of somebody with a disability. And with the etiquette class, they know how to act with somebody around with a disability. And then we also have a mandatory course, which is called ADA compliance. And that provides a general overview of the policies and rules of the ADA. We discussed the different rules and processes of how to turn in accommodation requests. We have very set rules within our policy of how we govern accommodation requests for disabilities. We push the interactive process with our supervisors to make sure that they're communicating with their employees to know exactly what's going on, what they need, what kind of accommodation they need, and if we can get them that accommodation. But we use the exact ADA process when it comes to reasonable accommodations. And that's our process when it comes to disabilities.
Wonderful, thank you. And that's I've written down follow-up questions already, so our panel just got a lot longer, I would say. So Jason, please use to hang on with us. So before we jump into the panel, Zelie, you're up, and I wanted to go ahead and have you introduce yourself and a little bit about your role in this kind of relationship building, as Charles was talking about, between employers and consumers, and what do you do? Tell us about employment solutions and more.
Sure. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me here to discuss everything. I am an employment specialist, which I like to just say is a job coach. That's what most people are most familiar with. So I am contracted by Louisiana Rehabilitation Services, which is also LRS, and I'm just an employment vendor who goes out into the community to secure jobs for people who need assistance. So I use the old school cold calling method. I like to go to the business that my person is interested in working in, discuss with the employer what their interests are, what their education level is, what their availability will be, and just try to secure a job match for the person that I'm assisting. So that's my role. And what I do, I assist any agency. It could be a government agency, which would be the state, or also a local city government, private businesses. They could be a large corporation, a mom and pop type of situation. I deal with anybody who's ready to hire a client. Some clients even do contract labor, so I help them out with that and just, help them understand that they are an employee, they are making money, they just have to, pay their taxes a little bit differently than someone else. So I help with all types of disabilities as well. I understand that this is the Developmental Disability Committee, but I can help with mental illness, physical impairments, hearing impairments, vision impairments, cognitive impairments, whatever type of situation or barrier that you have to employment, we can discuss and we can find a way to where it's not a barrier anymore and you can work in the community just like anyone else.
Well, like I said, a lot of follow-up questions already written, but we're gonna, before we get started, does anybody have any questions? If you do, please drop them in chat. I'm sure our wonderful panelists will be happy to answer them as we go throughout this questions. When we go right away I'm gonna just dive into the questions so that way we can get to some really deeper dive in all the information you all just gave us. I'm gonna pose this question to Charles. When your agency was looking for hiring and things like that, how did your agency kind of approach this state as a model employer? Again, that is more of a government-oriented employment space, but how did you all kind of approach the space to start including people with disabilities in this, in your workforce? How did that conversation start?
So unfortunately, I can't speak to the original decision. I've only been in my position for roughly a year, and it was implemented before my joining. But I can tell you that since I've been in this position, we have expanded quite a bit the number of relationships that we have. And just what I see on my side is over the years, and we don't always decipher if it's a developmental disability or other types of disabilities. As Zelie was talking about, we hire individuals of all disabilities. So over the years, we've hired numerous individuals, and a lot of times they have become very successful and career-driven employees. And one of the biggest challenges that we face, especially today, is turnover and hiring individuals that aren't going to be with us long term. And what we've seen a lot from this population in particular is that they are those long-term career employees. They're going to show up for work, they're going to do what they need to do, and they've been very successful hires for us.
I love that. Jason, anything to add on that, as you're sort of part of the more disability etiquette and anything like that? Any other thoughts on this and how long you've been involved in the hiring process?
Yeah, no, I kind of just chime off what Charles said. The incentive came from our governor, the same initiative before Charles came in and into his position. But the reason we implemented that decision, or they started that, is for all the reasons that Charles just said. Retention is best. You can't really label an entire group. It's it's just our experience, retention, working on time, disciplinary problems, none. It's been really good.
Absolutely. And Zelie, I'm going to turn this over to you. The same question, but more from that, you were talking about larger corporations and private businesses, because a government agency is a little bit of a different model than a private business. So when you're working with them from that hiring perspective, as we know, the hiring market is very interesting right now. I'll just use that word at the moment, but it's an interesting conundrum we're all facing in terms of hiring and many jobs available. But, so when private companies are coming to you, how are they approaching this same, how to include this practice, or just having this conversation with you from the get-go? What is that approach like?
I think I try to reassure the employer that you need to just approach it like you would approach anyone else that you want to hire. This is just a normal applicant who's coming in. Most of the time, it's a better situation because you may be more aware of what their accommodation needs or what their availability is, because we try to be so upfront and honest with the employer so that we don't set the employer up for failure or the employee that I'm helping. So a lot of times, to make them feel at ease, I'll ask for even a tour. Like, can you please tour me of your facility and what types of jobs are out there? And, what's the noise factor in here? What's the temperature in here? And then that way, when I go to my client and I discuss the job with them, I have so many detailed information to discuss with them and to let them know to make sure it's a match. And most questions that an employer will ask is this free? Do I have to pay this employee? Will the government pay for their job? And I'll just say no. I say, this is a normal job in the community that I'm finding. And then at that point, I would tell the employer, especially like you said, a larger corporation, they're going to know about the work opportunity tax credit. So I would discuss with the employer that, no, we can't get their hourly rate paid for, but I can help you register for the work opportunity tax credit, which, will benefit the company in the long run. And I think some of the local, like a state government employee or a city government employee, those types of industries do not benefit from the work opportunity tax credit, but a privately owned company or a smaller family-owned business definitely benefits from that work opportunity tax credit. So they're really open to it. I think you said we're working with an interesting situation at the moment. There are many jobs out there. Most people are not, the retention's not there. It doesn't matter if it's a diverse work group, your normal work group, people are just not keeping their jobs. So that is why we benefit them by helping them with their retention and reducing the turnover rate.
Absolutely. And I think those are some of those qualitative things we were talking about in terms of these like benefits to the employer and the end of when it comes to that. Before we kind of dive into a little bit more, this is for all three of you in a way. What kind of jobs are being filled? What kind of jobs are you being able to outfit with individuals with in this kind of position, like so that when as people are watching this or even watching this later, they can sort of start picturing their own workforce in and utilizing LRS or utilizing these kind of resources for themselves.
So for us, it's really, we have career fields outside of healthcare. We have a career field for just about anybody. And there is no limit as to the types of individuals or the types of disabilities that we use to fill those jobs. We have professional level and non-professional level positions that have been filled by individuals with disabilities. So for us, we can mold just about any one of our jobs or through reasonable accommodations. We have another job that may become a reasonable accommodation to fit the needs of the individuals.
Zelie, any thoughts?
I do agree with that. I think the opportunities are endless. Whenever I job search, I focus on the person that I'm helping. So whatever their ability is, whatever their education level there is, then there's a job for them. It could be, a repetitive task that, involves cleaning or maintenance, different things of that nature, or it could involve a nurse or anything. It depends on the person and what that person wants to do and what their level of education, what it is, on what types of jobs we can secure. I say we can secure any job. It depends on what the person wants.
Absolutely. Just to give a little bit more granular on that, like you kind of were talking about, like different kind of tasks, like repetitive tasks, or if you could give me just a couple examples of some kind of recent placements you've had, or even recent employment fulfillments you've had, Charles and Jason, just to give our audience a little bit more of an idea that's more, they can kind of see it in their own spaces as well.
So we have recently, we have some that work in our printing and our, I forget exactly what it is, but it's the ECC department that does a lot of printing, back-end computer type of work. We mentioned custodial, those types of staff positions, which we have in some of our districts. That's just the redundancy of doing the same thing over and over. We also have individuals that are higher functioning and have gained certain levels of education that allow them to be in professional roles as well.
Okay, I like that. Zelie?
Lots of opportunities here too. I would say the most recent repetitive task that we've had is a local bread factory. And repetitive task, I mentioned that because not every day every person wants to do a repetitive task. Where some of my individuals, that's what they thrive on. That's how they become successful and productive in their day-to-day work life. So we have a local bread factory currently bundling bread. It's very repetitive. The same tasks are done every single day. They're able to look at a computer monitor, scan the barcode. They know exactly, which type of bread is needed at that moment. We have another local produce factory setting that they're assisting with popping the stems off of bell peppers or loading up onions, 55 sacks of onions, or peeling carrots. And, they work in a group. They have coworkers that are near them. They're all doing the same types of jobs. So they feel, and it is a normal job opportunity for them in a factory with hundreds of employees. So it doesn't stand out. You're just there. You're clocking in like everybody else. You're getting a break like everybody else, and you're doing the same type of job every day like everyone else. So that's what I think makes our clients feel productive. The first time somebody asks you and they'll meet you, they ask you what your name is. And the second question is, what type of work do you do? So we give these people an opportunity to have that second question answer and to say what their job is. So we have lots of I like to deal with smaller companies. I think that they are more open to making an accommodation for the client. And I also think that they make them feel more comfortable, make them feel part of the family like every other employee that's there.
I really like that. The focal point of these webinars is really to encourage, like I was saying earlier, is to help employers, whether you're a small business owner or a hiring professional, to start looking at this untapped pool of talent as a resource to fill out all these positions that are available to you in the market and in your place, right? So as we're kind of looking at, one of the things we were discussing in the beginning of this series was, where do I start to look? Like, how do I even know that this is a place I can come, even access this pool of talent? And Zelie, this question is for you, and it's a two-part question. Is one, how can employers find this kind of resource? And second, what are some common hesitancies or like the top three questions you get before they kind of engage with you? Because it's an uncharted territory. So how do you help them sort of understand what's available to them and kind of get them comfortable into this resource and start utilizing this space as a benefit to their hiring practices?
Well, I agree with you. I think we're kind of hard to find. I don't think an employer knows that we exist. Now, once I build the relationship with them, then of course they know. But I've done my job for 20 years, and I would say 80% of employers do not know that LRS exists or a job coach exists. They're just not familiar with it. So I feel that I try to build that relationship by approaching a company, whether they've hired 5 of my clients or whether they've told me no 20 times because they just say, no, we don't have anything. I don't stop. I keep going. I don't bother them. I try to only go like maybe once a month or once every other month. So I think it's me that has to go out into the community and discuss with that particular employer, like, hey, this is what we do. This is how I can help you. This is the person who needs a job. And I also believe in cold calling, and I believe in going in person and giving them a card and giving them a resume. Because if I don't do that, then my client is competing with 50 other applicants who applied through Indeed, and they may not get the job. Where if I catch this employer ahead of time, like, hey, this is what I have, this is what they want to do, then they may only focus on my person and hire my person, which in turn helps the employer, because who has time to interview 50 people when I feel like I have a match for you and I've presented that person to you? And I feel, for the second part of the question, that employers are nervous to talk about this. Like, I know Jason, explained proper etiquette earlier and ADA. A lot of employers, they get scared to ask a question because they feel like, am I breaking a personnel rule? Am I breaking a human resource rule? Can I ask this question? Is it appropriate? So I try to make them feel comfortable that no question is inappropriate, because I'm not going to view it that way. Somebody else may view it that way, but I don't. I'm in that comfortable space where you can ask me a question, I can try to answer it. I've honestly never been put in an uncomfortable situation where I felt that an employer was asking something wrong. And if they are, I'm going to step away, because that's not a place that I want my client to be. I want them to be in a welcoming environment where, there's nothing inappropriate or unacceptable that's happening. So I try to reassure that employer, ask me, like, let me answer your question. Let me help you. Let me tell you. And I'll also reassure them that you're hiring a person that is no different than any other person you can hire off the street. We can't predict anyone's success regardless of disability or not having a disability. So I just try to have that employer focus on my client as just anyone else that you would walk through the door, interview, and want to hire.
I like that. Charles, Jason, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I'll add a little bit to that. So as Zelie kind of talked about, sometimes they are difficult to find. We have certainly found that, especially the last couple of years as we're reestablishing partnerships, because LRS, everybody else is dealing with the same turnover issues that we all are. And so reaching out and building those partnerships is integral. So to our overall success as an organization. And I found actually a lot of partnerships through career fairs. I have a recruiter who attends a ton of career fairs. We've been invited to a lot of local career fairs, and we found that a good way to get our foot in the door is just talking to other organizations that are at career fairs, and start having those conversations that lead down this road of establishing a better relationship to create that pipeline of talent coming in or applying for our positions. And with the state, it is a little bit, there are some barriers just to the whole application process. All state agencies post all their jobs through the same jobs.la.gov, through the same website. So it can be very convoluted to say, okay, well, let's apply for just this one position at DOTD. And that's where having the relationship that we've built with LRS, I think, has helped us out a lot, because we've had those, we actually had a Zoom meeting with LRS, and I have a conversation with a couple of them almost monthly of what's available in this area of the state. And having that initial Zoom just to explain some of our jobs and explain how our postings work, and how, if it's a continuous posting, well, they might not see the eligible list for 30 or 60 days. But if it's a posting that closes in 7 or 15 days, the eligible list, which is what we can see the candidates, our hiring managers can see the candidates, is seen a whole lot more quickly. And the odds of being able to hire somebody from a regular posting is exponentially higher than a continuous posting, just because those jobs are kind of always out there. And being able to make those points of contacts and just explain both our jobs, our availability, the way that we do things as a whole has been very fruitful for, I think, both us and LRS with having individuals placed and making sure that we get them in front of the right groups of people.
Absolutely. Jason, I'm gonna turn this in for you for a quick question, a little bit about what Zelie and Charles have talked about when it comes to sort of this kind of, I wouldn't say fear, but hesitation on certain questions and like wanting to make sure you understand the hiring of individual with disabilities. As you're doing your trainings on ADA compliance and ADA etiquette or disability etiquette, again, you're working with a government state agency. That's a totally different ballgame than, say, a private owner or small business owner. What are some tips or, you know, some things you would think to extend off to, say, a private business owner on from your trainings as they're thinking of hiring, or even working with someone like Zelie to bring a candidate into their workforce? What are some things you can mention to them that have been best practices for working together with the whole workforce?
Yeah, so when you're working with somebody, if you have an employee with a disability, you want to obviously treat them like everybody else. So that's the first thing. You want to have the proper etiquette, be able to converse with them. If you know the disability and the exact disability is made aware by that employee, to know knowledge of that disability and be aware of what that disability is all about is a very, very, you know, to have, you know, knowledge of it is a very good point. Brief your staff, you know, if they have any uncomfortableness, make sure they're aware and they understand the etiquette. Those are good common practice points for sure.
Absolutely. Zelie, can you talk about that for a little bit as when you're talking about understanding and making sure your staff is also knowing? Is that something you also support an employer working together with you to, like, how do you help an employer or make sure they're comfortable with this hire, making sure, how do they communicate this kind of space? And again, it's nothing out of the ordinary, but if it's the first time someone is working together with, we're doing it, it is a learning curve. So how do you kind of help them curb any anxiety, but also be able to be effective when it comes to this kind of new practice they're going into with hiring?
So I agree with Jason, like, you know, if the person has discussed what their disability is and what their needs are, it just helps everyone, because sometimes an employer may sit back and say, well, why is he taking so long to do that task? Or I told him how to do that 5 times. Why hasn't he learned how to do it yet? But if you know and you understand that that is part of their disability and that once they overcome it, it's going to be not a problem. Most of the time, I'll reassure an employer that they do need an extended training time. You know, if you allow that extended training time, then in turn, it'll be hopefully a long-lasting employee. It just takes that little bit of extra time normally in the beginning. I do assist with coworker introductions. A lot of my clients are nervous, and I find a lot of employers, they don't go out of their way to introduce people. They just put them in there, they're done with it. So as I'm job coaching the person, I will go to every single person and introduce them. And I firmly believe that, you know, your coworker today could be my client's manager tomorrow. So I try to build all of those relationships inside of the business. So I would say even break times, as simple as that. You know, if a client of mine is 5 minutes late from a break, well, did they understand that they needed to be back at 10:15? Or did you say, hey, go on a 15-minute break, I'll see you in a bit? They may not know what 15 minutes is. So I would tell the employer, we have to ensure that you either tell them they need a return at 10:15 or help them get their phone out on break time and set an alarm. It's just about discussing each person's need, making my person feel comfortable, and then making the employer feel comfortable. I feel the more you involve them in that process, the more you let them know what types of services they need, then the more comfortable they become. A lot of my clients are hearing impaired, so we set up sign language interpreters for them to start off with their job and to be trained. And that's wonderful, but the sign language interpreter will not be there for the duration of the job. So while that interpreter's there, we have to build that confidence with the employer. Like, we can text the person, we can note take the person. I have a dry erase board behind me. That's a really, really common thing that you can just stick it up on the wall and quickly, answer questions between the two of you. So even though LRS would provide some of these assistants, like a sign language interpreter, you still have to build what is needed for the rest of the job, to make them feel comfortable, so that when some of those services are no longer there, it's not a problem. Everybody's ready to go. And I'm a job coach, which means I go on site, I help them with their job. I help them learn how to do things. I help show them where products are. I mean, y'all would be really surprised. A lot of employers just think anybody can walk in and know the business. So I try to ask questions like, okay, well, what is this solution for, that solution for, when honestly, the employer should be telling us that, but sometimes they don't. So I'm there to kind of build that gap, just to show the client what is necessary and ask the questions. Well, how do you want them to do this? What time do you want them to do this? And then I can also provide a task list. So I think it's about keeping an open line of communication between myself, the client, the employer, and also my client's family, because sometimes I need to utilize that family to help give them daily reminders of, before they get out the car, this is what you need to do. And there's also a fine line. You can't job coach too long, because then I become a crutch. So I have to let that person be independent as quickly as possible so that they can thrive in their workspace.
Really, what a wonderfully informative answer. I hope everybody is catching that, and definitely this is going to be recorded. This is recorded, so if you're missing anything, don't worry, you can definitely catch it on the website. We do have a question from Gina Sternfels, and a really good one. It said, do you have to be concerned due to privacy? And does that come up in any of your conversations?
Are you referring to hiring? At what point is she talking about privacy?
Sure. Gina, could you provide a little bit more clarification in terms of privacy? Is it privacy in terms of disability, or in terms of personnel, or what exactly would you like our panel to answer? She is. Her question did pop up during learning about disability and things like that. So I'm going to start from there, and if she has time to answer that question, the kind of follow up to that. So
I mean, I just don't, I'm not trying to interrupt. I just don't know if she's talking about HIPAA or,
Yeah, and I was trying to look at the time when she answered it, and you were talking a little bit about disclosing about disability. Does that come into concern with privacy of HIPAA, or even kind of how you apply it when explaining to others in the workplace? Thank you. That's a great clarification. Okay.
Oh. I see the question is, are you
concerning due to privacy of that employee when it comes to explaining to your coworkers?
Yeah.
So are you violating
HIPAA? So you can't go and tell every single person, hey, this person has this medical or this disability. It would be only in something in a obvious case where someone who, for instance, someone has Down syndrome. So if you had somebody with Down syndrome, you may want to brief, hey, look, they have Down syndrome, because it's kind of obvious. But when it comes to medical information, there's HIPAA. You can't just give out information medically to anybody. So you have to be careful of that. If I'm thinking that's what the question was related.
Yeah, I think that's what I hope that answered the question, Gina, but follow up if you want more clarification for sure. But I think
that can go a lot of different ways depending on what we're talking about.
Oh, I did answer her question, yes.
Okay.
But I think that is a really great point. So how are you able to create, without of course, privacy laws and making sure people aren't feeling like you're just kind of blasting their information, but how do you sort of find that comfortable space to be able to be a welcoming workforce and making sure everybody's inclusive and understanding, but then without violating any rules? So, and that is a concern for many employers, right? Or even HR professionals. So how do you all kind of walk that line, and how can an employer kind of work with that?
Yeah, so it depends on what situation it is. If it's during the hiring practice, there's certain questions that you can ask. You can't ask other questions. which is there. I mean, there's a lot of them, and the ADA, if you go into their website, gives a lot of different examples on how to ask certain questions during an interview, or if you've already hired the person. Once again, the etiquette and the awareness training should help with those questions as far as, you know, privacy and what you're supposed to do and so on and so forth. So the training, and obviously how to ask certain questions. We have training that's covered in DOTD for all of our supervisors and above on these situations. So we provide training as far as hiring practices, so on and so forth.
Right.
So that, to answer that question, is to have policies and procedures that mirror ADA guidelines and train your employees.
I love that. Any other follow-ups on that, Sally or Charles?
Well, I'll just say that having a point of contact like Zelie or like that LRS representative is a great value of knowing more about the individual that they might not want to share themselves, or that you might not be able to share because of HIPAA, but just having a deeper understanding through that job coach type of individual, I think is a huge asset to knowing where their skills are, maybe even before their first day coming in.
We're gonna kind of jump into some more questions here. I have a few more, and I think we're doing pretty good on time. So I just want to kind of go into a little bit more of those experiences. I know we've talked a lot about technical things that employers and people who are hiring can think about, but this is for DOTD. If I know, Charles, you just joined, so this can sort of be a over blanket question, but tell us about the hires you've made, or one of the most significant hires you've made that you felt like this was the right way to kind of move into our recruiting process. This is a part of our recruiting process, not the only way we're recruiting, but tell us about that hire, the first hire, or one of your hires that made you feel like, yes, this is the great path we've taken into making sure we're building an inclusive workspace.
So I think that is a great question. And even though I've only been in this position for less than, or right about a year now, and we don't typically decipher from the different types of disability, it's just the overall disability. So, and I know we've been doing this, and I'll say for a long time, and I'll use a personal experience. I have a uncle that had a bad accident, and he was working with LWC. I'm not sure if his LRS back then, but he was referred to DOTD, and this was he was hired back in 1997. So it's a practice that we've been doing for quite a while now. And he ended up spending 20 plus years with us, retiring in 2018. And so that was my first real involvement. And I was still a teenager at that point, but I knew that he had these, and his was actually physical limitations, but I knew that he had these physical limitations after his accident, and was having a lot of difficulty with finding meaningful, gainful employment. And through this process, even though it's evolved over the years, he was still able to do that and be referred to, of all agencies, where I end up working many years later, through DOTD. So it's a process that we've had in place for a very long time. And just looking back and reflecting at that, and having conversations with him, we're very close. He gained, as an individual, he gained a ton with his physical limitations, with being able to have a position to go to every day and have that that career. He's now retired and has a pretty good retirement benefit for that. Now, one of my first hires was actually through BRCC and their their PSE program, and that's Program for Successful Employment. And this was an individual that was even placed within our own section. And just to see that transformation of them over their time with us. Now, they were with us for, I think it was about a year and a half or so, but the growth that we saw in that individual and how they changed from first day to when it was when they graduated the program was just a night and day difference, and how they approach things. They became very, very productive member of our team that we gave meaningful tasks to do. Yes, there was some redundancy in there because they did work with filing and copying and some of those things, but it's a great need. I know myself as a manager, Jason in his position as a specialist, there's a lot of things that we touch that if we could hand off to somebody else to do those, making copies, file this, it's a huge benefit for us. So it was just a really good process, and seeing it overall, it's meaningful on both sides, meaningful for the employer as well as the employee, to have that relationship and just see how things progress and develop over the time that they're with us. And if they can turn into a career employee, hey, that's awesome. We don't get many of those anymore. Otherwise, it's it's
Yeah.
meaningful employment while they're with us.
And just to state that, copying or anything, those are important parts of the job as well. Those are not that is a part of a business running as well, whether it's a state agency or a private business. Filing and all of those, record keeping, that's important. So everyone has an important role in any part of a space. So that is definitely important to note. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I'm going to turn the same question to Zelie as well. Can you share a success story that comes to your mind about from many of the connections you've made, especially in that private business space, that you were like, it did what it was supposed to do, and you saw that success, and where are they now, if you can tell us?
Sure. I would say every single employment is a success, whether it lasts a year, whether it lasts 30 days. Of course, we want it to last years and years and years. But like Charles said, it builds up the skills that that person needed at that time. And hopefully it promoted them to another business. And in my opinion, the biggest success is when an employer has hired a client of mine, and then a few months later, they're coming back and they're asking for another client. That is a compliment to my client. If my client did not do a good job and did not, do all the tasks that they needed, then they would not be asking for another person to come in and work. So it's hard to say every single success story. I would say the success is, like I said earlier, anybody who gets a job. The payday is wonderful. Everybody works. We all work for money, and these people are gaining, these earnings that are making them so proud, and they can buy things that they want. Or some of my clients may start a job without a driver's license, and then 6 months later, they've obtained a driver's license. Now they've obtained a car. I've seen all the different stages in life because I have done this job for 20 years. So I've seen the stages that one job offer can lead to just a lifetime of success. And that's what I can see every single day. And it is amazing. It's very rewarding. I guess I can't think of one particular incident because every single one is so amazing. And everybody has their own unique desires and needs from the job. Some people need it for earnings. Some people don't. They need it for the socialization. They need to get out of their house. They need to socialize with people. I see such a growth between a high school graduating senior until they're about 23, because that work world and environment has built up those social skills in them that they did not learn in school, that they're now learning from their coworkers. So I've seen people get married, have babies. That's something that a job helped them accomplish. So I've been through different stages in people's lives and seen the everyday success of a job. That's what it's all about, is having a job.
And that's true for all of us, right? That's there's a socialization aspect. I think we've been seeing that in the news that, because of the pandemic, a lot of that was taken away from people. And sometimes that was their thing. Even if it was going to the office, that was a kind of a nice compartmentalization of life sometimes, and it all kind of came together. So I think it's true across the board. You touched on this just a little bit, and I just want to specify this. I know I'm watching the time as well. I want to really talk about those soft skills. A lot of we were talking, like I said, a lot about the qualitative, let's fill these job positions. There's this great untapped pool of talent. You had talked about this at the very top of this panel, but and Charles had touched on it, but I really do want to talk about this to Charles and Jason a little bit before I turn it over to Zelie. What are some soft skills and professionalism and things that you have seen come from hiring, including these individuals in your workforce? And you, like I said, you touched on it a little bit earlier. I kind of want to have you expand on that a little.
So I'll go first. And jokingly, I'll say we work with engineers, so soft skills are not always prevalent. But what I've seen through the growth is the individual I was just talking about, when they first started with us, didn't speak a whole lot. And a lot of times communication was done through email. When they would come into work, they would email, they would ask for a day off. It would be through email, and just the growth over the time that they were with us, to having conversations and being truly a part of the team that sparked those relationships. Just the soft skills of having conversations, and I'll say both meaningful and non-meaningful conversations, just water cooler talk, has changed a lot with this individual in particular. But one of our other ones, I'll say, just the relationships that they built with not only their supervisors, but with others throughout the building, of communication, of just things like maintaining eye contact, just the things that we take for granted every day, that we've seen developed in their time with us, and having that place that they can go and do their job and take care of their responsibilities, but also spark conversations and connections that we still keep in touch with. Quite a few of these individuals that have now left us, that we've grown over their time with us, I'll say.
And I'll caveat off what Charles said. You know, a lot of the employees with disabilities, they've had to overcome disabilities their whole life. So they're very adaptable. So when they get to a new, employee, in my opinion, they're very adaptable, because, they've had to get over certain people's view of them their entire life. So they're very, adaptability would be a really good soft skill that they possess.
Zelie, any thoughts?
I think also, I guess I keep talking about from the client side, and I'm sorry for that, but a lot of times I try to reassure my clients that what they're feeling is normal. I'll let them know ahead of time, hey, you're probably not going to sleep good the night before you work, but that's normal. That would happen to me too. Or, your feet are going to hurt, your legs are going to hurt. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your feet or legs. Anytime you start a new job, everyone's body feels that way. So sometimes I feel that clients with disabilities, they feel that, oh, it's just me. I have a disability, I'm feeling this way, or I can't go talk to my coworker because I'm nervous. And I just reassure them that that is so normal. Everyone feels the same way. And it's as simple as, if you have a large break room, I'll say, you can sit by yourself if that's what you prefer. But if you want to build a relationship, sit with somebody else, visit with them, talk about the weather. Like, I'll even sometimes give them topics to talk about until they can build that confidence in the normal work environment and what the conversations entail. And they listen, and they, like Charles said earlier, at first it might just be an email, but then, at the end of 6 months, they're carrying on the longest conversation more than anyone else, So, and it also depends on the team that they're working with. If that team at the employer is welcoming and inviting, then it just helps everyone feel welcomed. Everyone who's there and the new employees.
Absolutely. And I want to touch on, when you mentioned a little bit on the last little segment, was that employers if they call you for a second referral, that's kind of like the ultimate compliment from you, right? For you, about your client. So when that happens, or even when you're following up with employers that you've worked with, kind of flipping the script on that for employers, like what are some things they are noticing that's happening to their entire workforce, having this inclusive hiring practice, including a person with a disability in their normal, like every day? Are they telling you any feedback like, hey, this has not only been great just to have them with us, but it's improved morale, it's improved our recruiting? Has that been a side effect, if you will, of including this in your process? What have you learned, or what have you heard from employers?
Definitely a positive side effect. I have a client in the past. She doesn't have either one of her hands. She doesn't have either one of her lower extremities, but she has prosthetic legs to help her. And, if a coworker standing there watching her sweep, wipe down a table, greeting people, keeping a smile on her face, well, you better work hard too. It would be my answer to the coworker. So I do think it builds morale. And I think other coworkers, they may stand back and be like, well, if she can do it, I can definitely do it as well. Or I better step up my game because she's doing better than I am. So I think it builds productivity as well as morale. Other coworkers maybe aren't as lazy as they were before because they see that, hey, their job might be in jeopardy because my client's doing a really good job. So I do think it builds morale as well as productivity to be around my clients. And I try to be as positive as possible when I go in there to just build everyone's morale and see that this is normal. This is just somebody who needs a job, is how I try to make them feel, coworkers and managers.
Absolutely. Jason and Charles, you were nodding very vigorously in that sentence. You want to tap onto that and tell us what you think, and how has that affected your agency and even your hiring practice?
So yeah, I just agree with what Zelie said. If you're seeing an individual that has overcome disabilities and they're the hardest working person in there, others are going to step up their game, or there may be other conversations to be had. And that's, I would say we've seen that as well, as that there's a lot of individuals out there that are some of the hardest working ones that we have. And I'm glad that Jason brought up adaptability too, because things change on a dime a lot of times. And so what you're doing today might not always be what you're doing 10 minutes from now, much less a week from now. So I agree with Zelie's comment completely, of if it can increase productivity because now the individuals with a disability are outperforming non-disability individuals. It helps everybody step up their game.
Absolutely. I know we're right on the minute. I'm going to leave. There were a few more questions we just never got to, so I'm not going to take up your busy days. But if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'm sure we will send it to our great panelists, and they can always answer and post, and we will email them back out. But before we close down the webinar, and like I said, I could probably keep going, and I want to be mindful of everyone's schedule. But are there any, one I would just like to leave with, all of you kind of each individually send a sentence of what has been the most meaningful thing or experience for you as you are working on recruiting and hiring and retaining individuals with disabilities in your workplace? What has been personally meaningful to you in this process? Charles, I'll start with you. I'll just go round robin in the way the Zoom screen is in the moment.
Yeah. So for me, it starts with relationships and building these partnerships with entities. As we kind of mentioned earlier, sometimes they can be difficult to find, and sparking those conversations. And as an agency, we've even made the commitment to create new partnerships, to onboard individuals with disabilities. And it's a commitment that's been made at our executive level, and to just continue to build upon that and see so many more avenues out there that aren't always the easiest to find, but the curiosity of finding them, starting the relationship, and then if we can have a partnership to place people, that's where I think there's a lot of my interest and my joy comes from in being able to have these conversations and collaborations with other organizations to form this pipeline.
Absolutely. Jason?
Yeah, and for me personally, it's like Charles said, when you communicate with somebody with a with a disability and you're aware of the disability, for me personally, I enjoy being a part of a diverse workforce. Most people enjoy being part of a diverse workforce. So I don't know, maybe it's motivation, so on and so forth, you know, I enjoy it. So just being a part of a company that, like Charles said, where the leadership is pushing for an incentive to hire disabilities, it makes me proud personally to be a part of such a company.
Love that. Sally, what do you think?
I think I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that, like Jason and Charles said earlier, that our governor started this process years ago, wanting to be a model employee. And, you know, by setting that stance, it also trickles down. It trickles down to the private sector and to the, you know, smaller companies that hire my clients. So, and I'm also grateful for the budget that they provide us. You know, this is free. This is free for every single employee who needs a job. Not every single employee, every single employer, it's free. You know, all of our services that we provide, it's no charge whatsoever. And to the person who needs a job with a disability, it's free for them as well. So I'm just grateful to be part of an agency that changes lives, that, you know, creates this person who now has a job and can be proud of what they're doing.
And jobs are so important to people's self-worth, you know, regardless of if you have a disability or not. And I think as much as I think we don't think it is a big part of how you look at yourself and feel about yourself sometimes. And that making inclusive hiring practices to make sure as many people can feel that, feel that joy of going to work, meeting new people, talking to them, working together is a great opportunity for all. I am going to close this on time. I unfortunately promised Charles that sometimes these ended early and I could give you guys time back. I actually stole 4 more minutes from your time. Thanks to everybody who joined us today. I really appreciate it. Our next one will be coming up in August, and that is actually when we're diving into benefits, a little bit more of those tactical benefits that employers get from partnering with agencies like LRS and getting individuals into their hiring practice, individuals with disabilities into hiring practice, what they can get, what is available to them. And I think she said the most important word in that is free. And how hiring professionals, HR professionals, as well as employers can tap into these resources into hiring. So we will be sending out those details right after this. There will be a survey that'll be coming to you shortly, and give us your feedback. And this will be also available on demand. So if you want to revisit this webinar, get some more insights, you can definitely log on to the LaDDC website for that information. We thank everyone for participating today. Gina, thank you for your great question. And thank you to our panelists from DOTD, Charles Wood, Jason Hooper, and Zelie Guidry from Employment Solutions. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Great afternoon.
You too.